Hey guys, this is Bella here. We are back for some more creepypastas. We are continuing Bedtime with part 5 called Sleep Tight. I don't know if this is the last part or if there's more. I just looked to see that the red hour time was 1 hour. So that's probably why it's taking me so long because yeah, I didn't think you'd enjoy a long 1 hour video of just this, which is why I keep it incredibly kind of just to how long it is. Sorry, I'm fucking exhausted. It's almost 9 o'clock, so, but yeah, let's just jump right back into it. I'm shaking as I write this. I was released by the police less than 2 hours ago, and I'm compelled to record the events of the past day and night as quickly and as accurately as possible. In some ways I want to forget, but I know that I cannot, and I know that I should not. For my own sanity, I must divulge what has happened. It is far too important. Should I ever allow myself to be swayed by the mechanical, rational nature of the world once again? These words should serve to remind me that what is unseen is both mysterious and frightening. After Mary left, I knew that I'd lost her forever, but rather than being consumed by depression and inaction, I was invigorated by one purpose, by one thought, by one idea that I knew I had to carry out. I had to destroy that thing, for I could not allow the chance that it one day might hurt my loved ones or desecrate the innocence of another child. How to get the blue light glasses, sorry. I also knew that I faced death, but feeling that I had already lost everything, that was a small price to pay. It is said that revenge is a dish best served cold, but waited my entire adult life to rid of this thing, its memory and the shadow that it had cast upon me. I had met the proposition of killing this fiend, this corrupt and perverted force, with a smile on my face. That night it would be dead, even if I had to drag it to hell with me. Busying myself for the next few hours, I packed a bag and wrote a letter to Mary and my family explaining what had happened and that they weren't to blame. I phoned my mother and father, then my brother, just to hear their voices one last time. But I did not let on that I thought I may never speak to them again. My mother's intuition led her to ask me if everything was all right. I smiled and told her I loved her before reluctantly saying goodbye. At around 7 o'clock, I made my way out to the car. The sun had already set, and the street seemed eerily quiet, as if the scene of an unattended funeral. I sat in the driver's seat, leaving the door on the other side open, awaiting my most unwelcome passenger. By 9 o'clock, nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. The place remained deserted, and the cold night air flowing through the open door was beginning to bite. As I sat there, contemplation echoed through my mind. I ruminated of the nature of this cadaverous parasite. One question rose out of my seat of thoughts, towering above all else, unmoving and continuous. Can you kill something which is already dead? I did not know if this thing was of the grave or something unworldly specter which could be considered alive in some way, but just as I was reevaluating my plan, there it was. It was subtle at first, but there was a small, almost indistinguishable shift in the suspension of the car. Had it been any other circumstance, I would have put down a gust of wind, pushing and pulling at its chassis, but I was already too familiar with the feeling from all those years ago, as the bunk bed would shift slightly with that thing climbing into the bottom bed. I knew its fouling calling card. The air grew denser. As if it's contaminated by some nearby corpse. It was in the car with me. Unseen, yes, but there, nonetheless. As I heard the slightest whispered breaths from the back seat, I leaned over and calmly closed the passenger door. I turned the key in the ignition. As I pulled out the street, I could have sworn I heard a quiet, yet distinctly malice snicker, as of something mocking me. Did it know what I had planned for it? Our destination was not far, but the roaming hills through which I had taken our country road penetrated, rose up, and diminished with regularity, a stark reminder of the ominous isolation of night. Occasionally on the way, I could hear something from behind, but I refused to look at that thing in the dark. Patience, it would not be long before I would confront it. The irony hit me. I was worried about scaring off the same thing which had terrified and tortured me as a child. I had to be resilient and so drove carefully and calmly through the countryside, swamped by darkness, hoping that my unearthly passenger would not suspect me. I'm so sorry, I'm so fucking tired. I arrived. The wheels of the car struggled and slid onto the undergrowth as I headed off to the narrow country road. The landscape had opened up as I looked at the broken and rotting trees around me. I felt that it was fitting to come to this bleak place in the cold of night to destroy the bleakest of things. The land suddenly came to an abrupt end, a cliff etched out from an old quarry, looking deep into the black waters of the lake below. The cliff edge was relatively flat, and it had in fact at one time housed a road which had subsided into a lake decades earlier. The local kids would tell you stories about vengeful ghosts of those killing during the subsidence, but they were just stories. Or perhaps they weren't. In the past I would have disregarded such tales, but who would believe mine if I told it to them now? I switched off the engine and parked several meters from the cliff edge, switching off any lights and composing myself of what could come. I sat in the car for what seemed like a lifetime, the only company given to me by the occasional splash of water against the cliff below. I waited. This thing was smart, of that, and there was no doubt. It had toyed with me, relishing the pain and torment it had caused me, as only something of a coldly frozen intellect could. For this reason, I knew it would suspect me, and perhaps even flee if I brought the car way too close to the cliff's edge. I had to wait for it to attack, let it feed. Let it reveal and gorge itself on me. Perhaps then it would not notice as I slowly plunged the car into the dark, icy water below. I was going to drown that bastard. I had appraised the potential consequences in my head, and reasoned that there would be a singular moment where I would have a slim opportunity to escape from the car just before it reached the edge. Mary and I used to go there occasionally, a place to be together away from everything else, and it did not look nearly as stark during a summer's day. I therefore had a place in mind and knew it well. The drop was at least 30 feet to the depths below, and I did not want to be in that car as it hit the water, nor trapped with the abomination. I waited. Then I heard it. Slowly at first, then increasing in rate and volume, a rasping, wheezing breath from behind. Strangely, it sounded more labored than before. Each breath a struggle, filled with fluid, rotten and decayed. A shiver ran up my spine. A rank, foul smell began to fill the air. The breath drew closer from behind. My heart began to race, beating hard and fast as I looked up and saw the windscreen begin to ice up from the inside. I could see my breath, a natural thing indeed, but what was unnatural was the breath visibly moving across my face from the side. I turned slowly. I wanted to cry. I wanted to leave, run into the night, but I had to stay. I could not allow it to escape. It was sitting in the passenger seat. I was staring at it, and it at me, hunched over, covered by the darkness, contorted, gaunt, hands seized as if it's fighting rigor mortis. It slowly moved towards me. One bony leg cracked and groaned as it slid over my lap and onto the other side. Oh God, it was sitting on me. It pulled itself in close to me, and through a shard of light provided by the moon, I saw its face. Skin hung from its jagged features, glassy eyes stared deep into me as its grin spread up through its face, unnaturally wide as a result of its half-rotten flesh, exposing the rotten muscles, broken teeth, and sinews of its rancid smile beneath. Pulling it closer, it opened its mouth, revealing a wet and putrid tongue which could be seen through parts of its missing jaw. Wheezing, breathing heavily, a foul stench which stung my eyes and filled my mouth elicit a response from me as I retched. My body attempted to expel the poisonous fumes, and as I did so it stopped for a moment. And then it crackled to itself, happy and content. Staring into its icy cold eyes, it yet gave the impression of an afflicted and increasingly weak old man. It was still incredibly strong, but it seemed as if though it had lost some of its potency. Perhaps leaving that elongated room had somehow affected it? Its long, protruded fingers caressed my face, and then, as a show of intent, it stuck one of them deep into my shoulder. I screamed as it bent and twisted inside of me, the rotting fiend moving its finger to cause the maximum amount of damage and pain that it could. As it did, so its other hand slid down against my body. It touched me. It was time. With my free arm, I turned the ignition on, and through my shoulder was still pinned to the seat. I managed to fight through the pain, put the car in the gear, and took off as fast as I could. The creature flailed and screamed. It attempted to climb over me into the back seat, but I held onto it with all my strength. The thought of what it did to Mary was enough to fuel my rage. We raced towards the edge of the cliff, and I eyed the driver's door frantically. As we neared our icy plunge, I screamed its anger in its festering, ranted face, and it pushed it off me. It scrambled into the back seat for dear life as I scrambled for mine by unlocking the car door. It was too late. The car careered over the cliff face, and before I knew of it, we hit the dark water, splitting the black glass-like surface with tremendous force. I should have died then, but an airbag took the brunt of the impact, although I still managed to scrape my head across the door frame. Dazed, I looked around. The sound that I heard coming from that thing was malformed, yet familiar. The squeal of some demonic child soon gave way in the anguish and rage of the ancient intelligence which knew that it faced almost certain death. The water was frozen and poured in through the now twisted open car door with such force that it winded me. I gasped for air as my unwillingly prey now did. It withered and twisted, and it looked for an exit. Spying the open door, it pulled itself through the water towards me. I curled a fist and smashed it into that thing's face. Pieces of rotten flesh flaked off under the impact as a dark liquid oozed from the resulting wound. Again, it attempted to get past me, and I knew that I had to keep it in the car long enough to drown, that I would have to die with it. I felt numb as the frozen water slipped over my chin. My heart struggled against the cold, and with a sudden urge I submerged and had breathed my last. I held my breath, but only to compose and ready myself for an icy, suffocating death. I hoped that it would not be painful. My thoughts returned to Mary and my family. An all-consuming sense of sadness and despair overwhelmed me. But as I struggled with that thing, trying to get past me and through the door, grabbing and failing its arms, I looked down and saw it. Its leg was trapped beneath the dashboard and the floor of the car by the impact of the fall, and although it could move, it couldn't leave. I turned immediately for the door, but I could barely see a foot in front of me in the black water, but there was enough moonlight to light my way. Just as I got to the door, the wretch grabbed a hold of me and pulled me back to it. It had given up all hope of escaping, but wanted to drown me with it. We fought for what seemed like an age in the cold, bitter grave as the car slowly sank deeper and deeper into the darkness. I could now feel my body pleading with me to take a breath, to exhale my last gasp of air, and then inhale the frozen water. I am happy to say that I used my wits to get out of such a horrible fate, orienting my body. I pushed my feet against the dashboard with enough force to at last escape its slippery grasp. I do not remember much else bar the anguished and hate-filling scream that my tormentor let out as I left it to die at the bottom of that icy lake. I found myself walking through the wilderness, cold, wet, but alive. The wound in my shoulder slowed me, but I kept the bleeding at bay by applying some pressure to it with my other hand. It took me 2 hours to walk home, and I am amazed that I did not collapse from exhaustion or hypothermia. When I saw a familiar sight at the end of the street that I live on, I was filled with a sense of accomplishment, a sense of pride and triumph. I beat that thing once and for all. That was until I went inside my house and found a trail of large wet footprints leading from my front door to my bed. Disbelief took me. Despair so sharp and so overwhelming that I'm unable to convey it with mere words. It was lying on my bed, waiting, a white sheet covering its emancipated body from sight. The human mind is a wonderful thing. Just as you believe your body has reached a level of exhaustion that it cannot recover from, that your emotions are so afraid that you feel that you cannot continue. A thought springs as if miraculous from a weary mind. Let it rest for now. I quietly crept through the dark and picked up my wallet, which I had left on the small coffee table in the center of my living room. Leaving the door unlocked, I left to intend a new plan and return an hour later. With moments of preparation, I slipped into the spare room. There I lay in the unsullied bed, waiting. I was sure that this was the end game, that instead of toying with me, it would come for the kill. How it escaped that watery grave I did not know, but I knew it would be damned if it would escape again. I could only hope it would sense me from the other room. I closed my eyes, pretending to be sound asleep. Time lumbered onwards, and although I fought it, exhaustion finally took me, sending me into a deep slumber. I woke up with its hands around my neck. It coughed and spluttered on top of me, a rancid black liquid dripping on my face as it oozed from its facial wounds. I struggled, gasping for air, and hoping that I had the strength in me to escape its grasp, but it was too strong, and my hands could not grip it with any sense of conviction, as if it seemed to be dripping wet from its plunge in the lake. It may have not seemed rational at the time, but my vision dimmed and the last light of consciousness extinguished from me. I did as so many animals do in their last moments. I played dead. Laying motionless, holding my breath, it shook me violently by the neck, then released me. I waited for a moment, my last chance to destroy this thing. It labored, breathing, relaxed slightly, and seemed to stare at me almost quizzically. I waited still for a shift of weight which might have let me thrown it on to the ground. Leaning down close to me, its wide, crumbling sneer puckered, gathering its putrid saliva in its mouth and what was left of its cheeks. It then showed utter contempt for the living and the dead. It spat its festering fluid onto my face, and the remnants dripping down onto me through the hole in its jaw. I wanted to scream, to do anything to remove such a vile smear on my skin, but I dared move. This time was not right. Leaning in closer, it prodded and scratched in the wound of my shoulder, the pain searing through my body. With all of my resistance, I remained motionless. Then, it slowly and patiently slid two of its long, distended fingers into my mouth. The taste was overwhelming, rancid, rotten, and dead. The arthritic clicking of its knuckles shook my resolve as it arched its back in glee and suddenly pushed its fingers deep down into my throat. Bro, what the fuck is this? I gagged as an instinctive reaction. Instead of being shocked, a garbled laugh emanated through its broken teeth as it thrust its finger deeper into my mouth. I felt its cold, hard flesh scraping against the inside of my throat, pleading without words for it to stop. I want to vomit. This is gross. In our darkest of moments, we sometimes find our true strength. I rolled into my side, using its weight against it, and finally managed to break free. I fell onto the floor. Its long reach grasping at my feet, I kicked and screamed, and at last was free. It stared at me, only for a moment. Rising up to the top of my bed, its brittle bones cracking under its own force, it now towered tall and gaunt, ready to pounce. Since I was a child, I had been a victim. It had terrorized me, taken my innocence, attacked Mary, and broken my life. I would not stand for it anymore. Sometimes the most dangerous prey is the ones who can outthink you, the one that lulls you into a false sense of dominance or superiority. The one who had conquered any fear of you with a sense of anger and betrayal. It had fallen into my trap, once conceived by logic, reason, and understanding of the world through the eyes of a scientific mind. Fire cleanses all. As it groaned, shrieked, cracked, and contorted, readying itself to pounce, in one swift motion I removed the blanket from the floor, revealing a bucket filled with gasoline, which I had brought into the short time of preparation. I threw it as hard as I could, the liquid splashing all over that horror and the bed. It grinned at me, mocking my very existence, making light of my pain and agony it had caused. From my pocket I pulled out a lighter, lit it, and threw it onto the wretched thing. It withered and screamed in agony, parts of its flesh crumbling away, searing into nothing in front of my eyes. I almost felt sorry for it. Let it burn. The fire got out of hand. Thankfully, a neighbor heard the screams and saw the smoke, calling the fire brigade. I remember nothing of how I escaped. I spent several hours in the hospital being treated for light smoke inhalation and painful burns to my hands. It still hurt as I type, but as with many superficial wounds, they will heal. Perhaps there'll be a few scars, but I can live with that. The police arrested me shortly afterwards, believing me a murderer. They suspected I killed someone in that fire, and find it entirely suspicious that I have deep wounds in my shoulder and scratches all over my body. I have been told not to stray far in the case and wished to ask me further questions, but they can ask away. I doubt they'll believe my answers. They found no remains, nor any evidence that someone else was there, but bar a strange outline of a figure etched deep into my bed and wall. It looked as though whatever had been there, and it had been there, attempted an escape, but I do not think it accomplished this. A weight has now been lifted off my shoulders. One which I now realize was always there since I was a child, in fact. I believe that thing had effected on me from a distance, and now that it's gone, I feel whole again. I'm devastated that I've lost Mary, and my house can be written off as I've probably been charged with arson after I realized that I started the fire, which means I can kiss goodbye to any insurance claim. My head aches, as does my shoulder, but my spirit does not. I am writing this from a hotel room. It's small and unassuming, but it will suit my purpose. Tonight, I intended to sleep and dream as I did as a child, before that wretched invaded my life. I believe that it was my rationality which saved me, my logical thought which allowed me to destroy such an evil thing. But I will never escape the conclusion that there is so much more to this life beyond the veil, out there in the darkness. It's a world that I have seen and do not care to revisit, but tonight I will rest, and tomorrow I will build my life again with the confidence that my unwelcome guest is gone forever. I can feel it. I know it. It will take time for me to adjust, and perhaps my mind will play a trick or two all along the way. It's difficult to abandon the paranoia of a lifetime. I must learn to accept my safety once again. I refuse to be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my days, but I will always be cautious, as when I left the hospital this morning, lying on the bed in a quiet ward, I thought as I felt my bed shake for the briefest of moment, but I know it was just my imagination. I am glad I've written down my experiences. It was illuminated much about myself to me, and most importantly, should anyone ever, God forbid, find themselves in a similar situation, then maybe you will know what to do. Now it is bedtime, and I must rest for I have never known a weariness such as this. Good night, and sleep tight. I don't even know, where to begin with that. I don't even know. That is such an interesting story. I don't even have words to describe, all that I read, because that shit was an hour long, but to know this entire lifetime you just have something that's always just been with you and attached to you, making you seem like you're crazy, and you lose your friends, your life, your loved ones, and your childhood because of this thing, this demon that's just attached to you, and then for people to not believe you and having to do this shit alone, it'd be I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know what to fucking think about that. But yeah, that is finally the end of bedtime. I'm so sorry that it took this long to actually finish. I had honestly forgotten about it at the time, but yeah, that is basically it. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you have any more creepypastas or r/no sleeps you want me to read, be sure to comment down below. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon.